Hi everyone, Jose Vega here, your federally certified court interpreter, giving you tips for law firms and paralegals on how to use court interpreting services and translators. Today's tip, as I mentioned in the last video, has to do with a story. It's that I had an experience with telephone interpreting. This is goes for you attorneys that do immigration attorneys, and also for any attorney in general for any sort of deposition or any type of client meeting that you may have or possible witness telephonic conversation. Uh, when you when you interpret over the phone, if you have to interpret over the phone, and this is happening a lot in immigration lately due to the pandemic, a couple of our local immigration offices are doing all their interviews with interpreters. They're doing them telephonically. So we have about 5 or 6 satellite offices, and 2 of them, the bigger ones, are doing all the immigration interviews where an interpreter is needed. They're doing them telephonically. So the person that goes in person to the USCIS office, and in there they provide the immigration officer the telephone number of the interpreter that's on standby. So if the person speaks, if the officer needs an interpreter, they're not a Spanish speaking officer, or they don't speak the language of the applicant, uh, they will call the interpreter. The interpreter is then interpreting over the phone, but it's horrible because you have all this background noise, and it's really a disservice to your client. If you can at all avoid a telephone interpretation, please try to do that, especially depositions, things that are important, where important information is being conveyed. If it's just a casual conversation over the phone, sure, you can use a telephonic interpreter. But for depositions, EUOs, sworn statements, you're doing your client a disservice. I had a horrible experience with paper shuffling. I could barely hear what was going on. That's one experience. And then another experience I had, the person had difficulty understanding or answering the questions. Typical of the types of answers you would get in a case that involves fraud. If the client or the person doesn't know how to answer the questions, there's people that don't know how to answer questions. They're not good at answering questions. Their educational level is not good. Maybe it's not necessarily fraud. You want to have the interpreter right next to them, because the interpreter will be able to convey the meaning by body language. Like 70% of our communication is nonverbal. So you lose all of that when you're doing it telephonically. The interpreter cannot hear, no one can hear, understand the question. There's repetition. There's, in one case, the person was hard of hearing. They had to take him to a different room and give him a headset. So the officer was separated from him. The officer couldn't see the nonverbal communication, the body language of the person that's being interviewed. So if there's any immigration officers out there listening to this video, watching this video, try not to do it telephonic. I know you're trying to avoid the, COVID and all that stuff. The social distancing, it's just a disservice to the person. Now, if you need to do it, try not to shuffle paperwork, and we can hear everything in the background, especially with these speakerphones. Also, telephonic interpreting, or RTI as it is called, and I'll do more videos about this, remote telephonic interpreting may be something pretty useful for your law firm. So nowadays, telephonic interpreting is not limited to the bigger corporations where you could call and get an interpreter on the line. We can provide you with a phone number and a PIN number. And let's say you have a client walk in and the client speaks Japanese. Uh, Maybe you're used to turning down people because clients, prospective clients, because you don't speak the language. It's going to be, you know, you're not going to be doing them that good of a service if you can't communicate correctly with them. Well, we have this service where you can just dial a number, dial a pin, and within seconds you'll have an interpreter in over 200 languages on the phone. You'll get an interpreter on the line. So you got somebody walking in, they speak Japanese. You call this number, in less than a minute, you'll have a Japanese interpreter on the line. Sure, they won't be a court certified interpreter, but big deal. You don't need it for this sort of thing. You're trying to see if you want this client or not. You can interview them over the phone with the interpreter on the line. You're right next to them, and if it works out, you have a new client. And the interpreter, the benefit of having an interpreter over the phone is that you don't have to pay the 2-hour minimum or 4-hour minimum. It's usually a 2-hour minimum for any language. You just pay the 10 minutes or the 15 minutes that you use it. So it ends up being cheaper. Let's say you have to call a witness, or let's say you do criminal work, and you have 2 or 3 prospective witnesses speak a different language, and they're friends of your client. Why not, ask them a couple of questions before the depo? I mean, you can trust what your client says, but you can, instead of waiting for opposing to depose them, just call them up over the phone, and you'll be able to talk with them. These interpreters are really good interpreters over the phone. They know what they're doing. And I think it saves, it may actually give you a little extra money at the end of the day. You can get a couple of good clients because of this. Or if you're in an area where, there's a lot of foreign language, foreign influences, a lot of big population that speaks a different language. Here we have Haitian Creole, and there's a lot of attorneys that speak Spanish and they don't speak Creole, or they speak English and don't speak Creole. And these Creole speakers need legal services. Maybe you can have that, and then just call them over the phone every time you need to talk with them. You just call the interpreter over. I think it's very useful. Maybe workers' compensation, for example, would be an interesting one where you have a lot of volume and you only have to talk with the clients, a couple of times here and there, and you may be able to even, I don't know how much, recover the cost for the interpreter. So just something to keep in mind. I'll do another video regarding the telephone interpreting, but for this video, if you need to take away something from it, telephone interpreting for formal meetings, for meetings where you need to have every single word come across, for depositions, for hearings, is not recommended at all. Telephone interpreting for informal meetings, great. Thank you very much. Like and subscribe.